Can you tell us a little bit about what is going on in Ethiopia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be more than happy to get you more angry chat messages, I guess. There's definitely a lot there. I mean, I think really what's happening in Ethiopia and really more broadly the Horn of Africa, because I think it's deeply interconnected. I think what we're basically seeing is the contradictions of imperialism in the 21st century, essentially. In this era, and I think you look at the National Defense Strategy of the United States, the most recent one from 2018. By the way, if you're looking for something to look for this year, 2021, the new National Defense Strategy is coming out. Important document because it really lays out a lot of the thinking openly there publicly for everyone of US imperialism and what they're trying to do, and it matches pretty well what they end up doing. And you look at what they say, and they say that the most important thing for the United States now is interstate competition, and following on that, that then the most important thing is to maintain favorable regional balances of power, and that the most important part about that, or the easiest way to establish that, is to establish more interoperability with their allies. So you have obviously a crucially geostrategic part of the world in the Horn of Africa. And, I think many people probably already know about that. But one way I always sort of explain this to people is just remember what happened with that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal and how it became this huge thing because there's so much global commerce that flows right there
Mhm.
through the Indian Ocean, through the Red Sea, up through the Suez Canal, and the Horn of Africa is right there. And then in addition to that, the Horn of Africa has a lot of strategic and economic potential itself. Maybe most notably for our current 21st century era, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is about to turn Ethiopia into what's essentially a green energy superpower. So that has a number of, I think, very important reverberations in terms of global politics. So you've got a geostrategic region of the world, and you've got the desire of U.S. imperialism, like it does in other geostrategic regions, whether we're talking about, the Persian Gulf in Iran, whether we're talking about China, whether we're talking about, the Alba axis in the Americas, wants to do everything it possibly can to make sure that they're controlling the politics in that region. And it doesn't even necessarily matter if the countries want to work with the United States, if they want to have relations. It only matters that they are willing to sign up and agree with what everything the U.S. says. So historically, going back 30 years, the TPLF, did play that role for the United States. Of course, they, connived in the invasion of Somalia and the destabilization of Somalia, which had its first united government since 1991 and was ending a civil war. But it goes even deeper than that. I mean, I mentioned the Alba countries, Ethiopia, which does have a lot of influence in terms of the broader sort of multilateral world stage, was a major force in working against the socialist Hugo Chavez-led Venezuela ascending to the UN Security Council rotating seat in 2006. Even though the TPLF used to always act like they weren't dealing with AFRICOM, you can see it in WikiLeaks. They were heavily encouraging the U.S. to improve its footprint vis-a-vis AFRICOM. They
Does
would
that help their GDP growth? Because didn't they have the highest GDP growth of any African country for a while?
They did. And yes, it absolutely did. Ethiopia got all the things that other US satrapies get, that it doesn't really matter, what kind of, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. If you sign up to US imperialism, you get preferential access to US markets, which is huge, especially for, countries that are primary commodity producers. You get aid loans, you get weapons. I mean, you get all these things that help you improve your economic situation. There's actually one WikiLeaks cable where a US ambassador is talking to a high level Ethiopian official. I think it was at that time Prime Minister Meles Zenawi. And at the same time, he's saying we're going to sanction Eritrea and claiming it's because they had bad behavior. The same cable, he's telling Zenawi, well, don't worry about the human rights rules that are put around U.S. weapons, specifically Black Hawk helicopters. There's a way you can get around that essentially, so that it's whatever you do, kill whoever you want, jail whoever you want, invade whatever countries you want. There will be no consequences, and you'll still be able to stand. So it was definitely sort of a Faustian bargain there, but the TPLF was that. The TPLF was gone, and I think there are many things that can be said about Abiy Ahmed, but he wasn't that. And primarily, you had two main issues. You had one, what I mentioned, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is this huge dam in Ethiopia. I believe it's going to be the seventh largest hydropower project on Earth. It
Jesus.
has the ability. Go ahead.
No, I said Jesus.
Yeah, huge. So it has the ability really to drive development in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and perhaps even further afield, Uganda, Kenya, Chad. And of course, it's 100% clean energy. And I think there's a lot of problems with that. One problem being that Egypt does not want to see that under any circumstances. It's not that Ethiopia was even really threatening Egypt, but I think for Egypt, just the fact that Ethiopia could potentially manipulate the waters of the Nile against them is unacceptable. When you look at basically what you have happening in Egypt is also happening in Sudan. As climate change drives desertification, more and more people are moving to the Nile. You've got, more people in smaller areas, less arable land, more people going to these mega cities. And part of the reason the Arab Spring happened, quite frankly, is the inability of the country to produce enough food for people, the failure of different crops, and all these different pieces. And I think Egypt looks at that and says, well, we can't give Ethiopia the ability to potentially, manipulate our politics. Now, whether Ethiopia was ever going to do that, I think is dubious. But either way, that was a big issue because Egypt. Go ahead, Pascal.
I want to interject there because I've actually seen reports to the effect that at various times over the Grand Renaissance Dam project machinations, that Egypt supported the TPLF, gave weapons to the TPLF, because the TPLF was willing to act as a bit of a bulwark against the Ethiopian aspiration of facilitating that project, and the Egyptians were more than willing, to facilitate that. So I don't think Egypt has as clean of a hands as some would think in terms of what's going on in between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. And I think that the Grand Renaissance Dam project casts a lot larger of a shadow than a lot of people are willing to talk about. And I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
No, I think you're 100. I think you're 100% right. So let's see if we're both proven wrong. But you look at just the reality of where Egypt is. The U.S. is trying to pivot to Asia. We know that they're trying to surround China and drive a new Cold War. Part of that, and this started in the Obama administration, is to try to create some form of strategic withdrawal to a degree from the Middle East in terms of like actual troops, which means the security architecture they've set up. This so-called Abraham Accords normalization of Israel nonsense that sadly Sudan, this coup government, has signed up to, and of course the role of Egypt as a security guarantor for Israel. So just take that alone, forget every other factor. This is obviously a huge issue for the United States if one of your main allies that you're sort of depending on to help keep control of one of your most important geostrategic regions. And remember, they're saying one of the most important things is to maintain favorable regional balances of power. Then just right there, I could see how the U.S. would say, well, look, if we got to lose somebody, it's Ethiopia, not Egypt. But I do think that there's more than that because I think it really goes to the heart of the Horn, and that is the Eritrea Ethiopia peace deal. Now, I think you can sort of infer this from public source information, but I do know from our trip there in Ethiopia, I was told this by a cabinet minister, that in negotiations with the US government, that they were saying directly, like, we do have an issue with the peace deal you have with Eritrea, which obviously is historic for the region. It's a part of a broader move that, has been pushed for more unity around the Horn of Africa, for those countries to sort of use their collective economic capacities to try to improve and drive their economies in a much more significant way and drive development and
And
hopefully
don't forget, Eritrea will not participate in AFRICOM.
Eritrea won't participate in AFRICOM. They stood up to the United States when it came to the destabilization of Somalia, which was when the most heaviest sanctions were put against them. They refused to participate in the U.S. attempts to blockade and isolate Iran. They were sanctioned for trading with North Korea. They were reaching out to countries like Cuba and Venezuela. And the U.S. is openly saying this in the diplomatic cables, and it was becoming deeply problematic because they were refusing to sign on to the ideological dictates of imperialism. And there's longer conversations I'm sure people want to have about what's happening in Eritrea and important things to say about all of that. But the fact of the matter is clear. The record is clear. that their own record of opposition to the U.S. on crucial geopolitical issues means they're not trusted. The U.S. wants to isolate them, has gone out of its way for multiple decades to try to get other countries to sanction them, to stop giving them money, all these things. And now all of a sudden you've got Ethiopia, 110 million people, potential economic powerhouse with clean energy. You've got Somalia that's got other tens of millions of people all saying, well, let's come together more on a larger basis. Let's cooperate, which is logical. You're in the same region. There's a lot of interrelated possibilities there economically, and let's try to let a rising tide lift all boats. And I think that ultimately that's very dangerous for the United States, because it means in a key geostrategic region, you could have a more powerful entity, both the individual countries and their combined power, that you can't really count on at any given moment, when you really need to be able to count on people in this broader region as you start to focus on many other factors. And there's more that can be said, but I think those two things, the dam and the peace deal and the idea of greater unity of the Horn of Africa, I think is what's really driving this conflict and what we're seeing.
So do you two, this is a question to the panel, do you see the U.S. involved in destabilizing that peace deal?
Yes. I think that a huge reason why the U.S. was willing to support the TPLF, I don't know if they, I don't know what level of support they've given. Nothing would surprise me. I don't know if it is strictly rhetorical. If it's more than that, nothing would surprise me. But I do think that, what are they looking to gain from backing a conflict whose only goal is to put the TPLF in a position to influence the policy of Ethiopia? It seems to me the biggest change and the biggest thing that would be different would be the attitude towards Eritrea. And I think that is playing a major role in why the U.S. has been backing this regime change attempt.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This Is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.